Hi, this is Mike Ernest, and I want to discuss today a vital and often overlooked element of our career success and how it plays into corporate execution overall. It's grown to be understood as the conversation quotient, or CQ. We define CQ as the intelligence to manage important conversations. Just like IQ or EQ, it really is an ability to be able to perform a certain type of skill. And in this case, the skill is managing our most important business conversations. And to make sure we're really clear on this definition, I've even further defined some of the key terms within the definition itself, such as intelligence. It's important for us to remember that intelligence is the ability to acquire and apply knowledge and skills, not just acquire knowledge. And so when we look at CQ with intelligence, obviously the importance is on our ability to actually apply the knowledge that we gain, not just have a bunch of knowledge in our head about how we should perform and how we should manage conversations. And another key term is manage. Manage in our world means to interact in a way that develops trust and educates people's perceptions, behaviors, and decisions. So it's managing the interaction that is all important to us. So when we look at the definition of CQ again, the intelligence to manage important conversations, it's all around what are we doing to develop that trust and be able to share information in a way that further educates the people that we're talking to make better decisions or to modify their behaviors or to change the way they're perceiving something to be. Another key term is important conversations. So there are lots of conversations that we have during a given day or week at work, but there's only a few that are really important where there's a desired outcome. And so our definition here for an important conversation is when there is a desired outcome. It's when we're trying to get people to see things our way or support our actions or our initiatives. So an important conversation, again, is not all conversations. It's just the ones where we identify that there's something we're trying to accomplish. There's something that we're trying to obtain from the specific conversation itself. Then lastly, doesn't show up in this definition, but we'll be talking about a lot, are customers. It's important for us to realize that we really get paid to support customers. Like when you look at your job description, ultimately the paycheck comes down to we're expected to perform certain tasks in order for our customers to be supported or to be taken care of. And that's kind of a little bit of a different way of looking at job descriptions, but it's important because when we look at customers and when we use the term customer, I want to make sure that we have that broad enough to understand that our boss is our customer. Our external customers are obviously our customers, but then we have coworkers and a lot of colleagues are customers of ours, and we have some obligations that we need to support them, and even direct reports. We have obligations to help grow them, to help nurture them, to help hold them accountable to perform in ways that are supportive of them in the organization. So when we look at customers and we use that term, please make sure we keep it broad enough and don't think that I'm just talking about external customers or people who are writing our organization's checks. So why is a high CQ so vital in the workplace? And to describe this, I'll take two passes at it, one at the macro level. So we'll look at it through a company-wide lens, and then we'll look at the micro level, at an individual employee or an entrepreneur. And so looking at it from that macro view, the first realization is that in any successful initiative execution, it requires conversations to obtain specific outcomes. So if you want to decompose any efforts around increasing revenues or decreasing operational costs or changing in strategies, and we break down what that execution actually looks like, what you're going to find is that in every single situation, there are going to be critical conversations that need to be had with specific groups that need to change decisions, behaviors, or perceptions. So obviously, if you're looking at revenue generation, let's say we use the very typical idea of going back to our existing customers and having them purchase additional services or retain them so they continue purchasing services. Obviously, unless it's a very specific online-only type of business, which does exist, but it's certainly the minority, we have to have conversations with those clients in order for them to make the decision to continue to purchase or to purchase additional services. And it's the same thing when we look at decreasing operational costs. When we're going to be modifying procedures or processes, we are going to be having conversations and explanations with groups. And at the end of those discussions, there needs to be a change. There needs to be a buy-in, if you will, for a different way. So every single time we look at even something in the operational change environment, we're going to see that whether there is a successful implementation or execution of that desired change, there are going to be key conversations that must go a certain way for it to be successful. And lastly, certainly not least, is just change in strategy in general. whenever we look at pivoting or modifying our approach, we're going to be needing to have discussions with groups of people on changes. And to the degree that there is clarity and there's buy-in and there's understanding, those changes and those pivots are going to take place much more efficiently. And it's really interesting how I've been in the change world and the turnaround world for a couple decades, and we give a lot of thought to our overall strategy, and even we break down that strategy into incremental steps. But what I realized over time is that we don't focus in enough on these actual conversations and ensure those go well. We kind of look past them. A lot like in our career in general. We just make it an assumption that we can have these conversations, and we don't realize what a leveraged time this is. To the degree that those conversations obtain outcomes that are satisfactory or that are beneficial to us, things move in the right direction. And to the degree that they don't, things dissipate. But again, we've had a culture where we kind of hide the results, and we smooth over the results, and we make excuses like, the people are stubborn, or the clients are stupid, or they're thinking about it, or there was some kind of an excuse on why they didn't follow through on their side, and we dissipate the focus on the conversational event, and we put it more on the surrounding information. So again, it's important to understand that right at the heart of all initiatives, all execution events, there are going to be conversations that must go in certain ways. And if we have the discipline to actually ensure that we maximize our effectiveness at those conversations, it's incredible what can happen in the speed or the likelihood of success of these initiatives. Another macro area regarding why CQ is so vital in the workplace is with customer loyalty. And when we think about customer loyalty, going back to our original definition of it's our bosses, it's our colleagues, and our direct reports, and our external customers and internal customers. And when we remember the customer and understand from all the years of research on what are customers looking for, what makes them loyal, it really boils down to a few things that must take place in that customer service provider relationship. And I've called out 4 of the main ones here: avoid problems, challenge limiting beliefs, learn new ideas and insights, and then work within their constraints of the customer situation, such as budget, skill, level of understanding, etc. That's what customers are looking for in their experience. And you can superimpose a boss, you could put direct reports, you could put colleagues, you could put external customers in that role of the customer, and they're all going to be looking for very similar things. And you don't need to believe me on this. You can just think through this in your own world and think through or even ask your boss or your direct reports, what are you looking for? And is it important that I help you avoid problems? And when I feel like there's a belief of yours that just isn't really supporting you and what you're trying to accomplish, that I'm able to point that out to you in a way that makes sense. And what you'll find is absolutely, this is customer loyalty. And what's critical to understand about customer loyalty and as it relates to CQ is that these events take place during conversations. So to the degree that we manage our conversations with our customers, we have a much higher likelihood of helping them avoid problems or challenging their limiting beliefs in a way that is seen as constructive and supportive and appreciated. Or we have the discipline to work within the constraints and manage our communications with these people within the constraints of what they're dealing with or what their group can do. And so we don't belittle them. We don't judge them negatively. We don't make them defensive, with some of the natural limitations that they have in their group or department or within their own skill sets. So customer loyalty actually occurs during important conversations. Once again, from the macro level, all execution, all roads lead through important conversations to get to where we want to go. Customer loyalty actually gets created and delivered in the medium of important conversations. So that's where, at a macro level within the workplace, CQ is critically important for delivering those vital requirements in the workplace. Then if you look at CQ from the micro level, right down to an individual employee or an entrepreneur, depending on their job description, individual employees or entrepreneurs experience the majority of success and failure as a result of only a few conversation types. Here are some common important conversation types that oftentimes exist within the job descriptions of employees or entrepreneurs. And certainly when we look at the new customer acquisition conversation type, it's going to be alive and well, certainly in the entrepreneurial world, and depending on the job description of an employee, that could be very relevant there also. Next one is customer development and retention. So now we have ongoing customers, kind of like what we talked about on the macro level. What are we doing and how do we engage with them to really develop that customer loyalty and deliver the things that they're looking for? It's not just about providing whatever service that they're paying for. They're really looking for that additional interaction. And again, those are taking place at the conversational level. And this is a type of conversation, an ongoing dialogue with customers. Next one, project or collaboration meetings, whether it's internal or external types of customers. This is another type of important conversation that people are judging our abilities on how well do we manage, how well do we perform, what do we bring to these conversations? Do we come across as egotistical and we don't listen and we interrupt and we're argumentative and we're judgmental? Or are we seen as thoughtful and collaborative and share information in supportive ways and we're an asset in that conversation? To the degree that those judgments are placed upon us, our careers are going to speed forward. It's important for us to remember that you look at the top of any organization, and the easiest ones to monitor in this world are professional services. So let's just take an accountant. If you look at who is the managing partner of an accounting firm, I've never, and I've worked with lots of them, seen and heard from the top that they got there because they're the best accountants. Matter of fact, it's a guarantee that that's not what got them there. That basic service was enough to get them employed and maintain, a gainful employment. But it was their ability to collaborate with other people and to produce results through working with other people that got them to the top of the organization. And that is something that we all really need to internalize when we're trying to look at how do we maximize our productivity? How do we maximize our value for the organization? Is it to continue to grind away at some incremental improvements at our core skill set? Or is it better, and probably better for the organization, if we learn how to better collaborate and better perform with the people that we're working with? And my assertion is that there's no question that that second skill set is overlooked. We refer to it again as CQ, and we don't do enough to develop that. And we'll have some explanations as to why we typically don't do that. But it's important to call out that this is huge, and it's a great opportunity for you, whether you're an entrepreneur or you're an employee within an organization. This realization and this ability to go improve your CQ is going to pay dividends. But back to our discussion. The management meetings are also the same type of high stakes, very important, highly judgmental in terms of how our behavior is, both good and bad. Other ones, team meetings, same, just a little bit less visibility of the upper management. And then employee reviews. That cuts both ways, both in terms of a manager having an interaction with a direct report as well as a direct report up to a manager. What does that dialogue look like, and how constructive is it, and how well managed is it? And that supports both of the people in that meeting, because even the manager, the word gets out on their ability to support, groom, nurture, hold accountable their direct reports, and vice versa. So I hope I did a sufficient job of explaining why CQ is so important to both the organization as well as the individual. And I'm guessing that this may take a little bit of time to really sink in. It took me a decade to understand when I was going into organizations and I was having to let go of half the people, or I was having to figure out how to pay more a certain subset of people. It was not clear to me how I was making these value judgments. I had some pretty strong opinions as to who was good, who was not good, who deserved more management and upward mobility. But it was very difficult for me to clarify how I was making that judgment. And now with this CQ and what we just talked about, really what it is, it's a culmination of how well are the people able to successfully obtain those macro results the organizations are looking for, as well as demonstrate their ability and their value in those critical conversation types at that micro level. So again, hopefully we're clear that CQ is really important for organizations as well as for individuals. However, even though it's so important and so valuable, traditionally it's been very difficult to identify and measure. And a few of the reasons for this I've identified here. And the first one being that there are thousands of books and courses on the broad concepts of verbal and nonverbal communication, sales, investigating, negotiating, presenting and rapport building, but there's nothing on how to best measure and manage a complete conversational event. It's fascinating. And so I was thinking a decade plus ago that I was going to find some guru or some body of knowledge and really be able to get my arms around it quickly and be able to help my various groups and teams and companies grow their skill sets, grow their CQ quickly, but it wasn't there. I found lots of different books with good information, but they were specific or very unique, and nothing was encompassing an entire conversation. And so it cast me on this journey of trying to wrestle this to the ground. It was much like that feeling of looking at, 1,000 car parts spread all over the garage floor, but not having a model by which to know how these things all fit together. And so I've been looking for and trying to work on defining that model for some time. So that lack of clarity and definition really leads to another challenge, and it's referred to as the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is a cognitive bias wherein relatively unskilled individuals suffer from illusionary superiority, mistakenly assessing their ability to be much higher than is accurate. So we don't have a well-defined description of, well, what does it mean to manage a conversation effectively? And then we have this kind of natural tendency to have a higher perceived ability to actually do this type of thing. And then finally, to add to it, there's been no conversational model to review with everybody and debate and then get to a point of adoption and use it over a period of time. So we haven't had the accountability. We've had this illusionary superiority complex, and so it's been a bit of a mess. However, it's really important. So I'm very happy to report that after a number of years of research and testing and trying and training and getting feedback and tweaking, we now have a conversational model that we can use as this backdrop for clarity, for debate, for accountability. And so I want to walk through that with you really quick here. Obviously in our training, we go into much more detail and we start working on the skills and those types of things. But for this, I just want to give you the broad strokes so you have an idea of what this looks like. And you also start feeling that level of kind of excitement, I hope, and saying, wow, this is something I could actually learn to do. And there is, there's more process, or there's more consistency than randomness when we look at managing these important conversations. So let's take a look at the ACT conversation model basics. And what we see is that we have an important conversation at the bottom, meaning that this model is only relevant when we have a desired outcome, which is our definition of an important conversation. And we're also going to have two parties involved. One is going to be the customer, which we've now defined as many different types of people, such as a boss or a customer or direct report or colleague. And we also have the person who's going to be managing the ACT model, which is the actor, which we kind of enjoy that name. So that's going to be the person managing the conversation. Again, we refer to them as the actor, and the customer is going to be the person that we're going to be talking to, which obviously could be a group or it could be an individual. And the medium could be in person, it could be over the telephone, it could be over a web type of conference. But the key thing is that there is going to be at least a verbal conversation taking place, and often the visual component will be part of it. So the very first thing that takes place in any important conversation is going to be the alignment phase. And this phase begins as soon as the two parties either see each other, or if it's just over the telephone, they begin their conversation. And what we're concerned about in the alignment phase is really one thing, and that is having the customer develop a level of comfort, or we can call it trust and rapport, with the actor to ensure that there is an open and high quality dialogue. And so there's many things that go into this alignment phase, and it's everything that you've learned about gaining rapport and having people feel comfortable with you, and demonstrating that the actor is there to help, rather than be a concern or a potential threat. And so when we get into the actual training, we break down those various levers of how we become and are perceived as more trustworthy. And we could summarize the alignment phase by simply understanding that in this phase, the customer is really asking themselves, is this actor here to be of help to me or a potential threat? And to the degree that we're perceived as a help, they're going to be more open. To the degree that they're seen as a threat, it's going to be more of a guarded and less quality dialogue. And so what we ask ourselves is, do we have enough trust and rapport with this customer to even justify going to the next step in this conversation process? If we feel that we do, we can go to the next step, which is going to be the clarify phase. And the clarify phase is quite different than the align phase, in the sense that the align phase happens no matter whether we like it or not. The customer is going to be judging us and our ability to be trustworthy and helpful, just like we're going to be judging them. And so that's going to be taking place whether we want to or not. Whereas the clarify phase, we need to bring our discipline and our skill sets to ensure that that takes place. And that's all about being mindful enough to ensure that we investigate or we clarify what are the customer's beliefs and ideas and concerns about the topic that we're bringing to bear in this conversation before we go on and start telling them what we think ought to happen or how they should see the world or what we want them to do. And so the clarify phase is absolutely a choice. It's something that a lot of untrained, unskilled people skip, and they think that they're, being more authoritative by telling, directly and just getting right into what we feel people should do. And there are two parts to the clarify phase. One of them is asking good quality, thought-provoking questions, and the second one is active listening. Those two skills are the things that are focused on in the clarify phase and that we ensure we utilize to the best of our ability to obtain that understanding of the customer's values and beliefs on the topic that we wanted to discuss. And when we feel like we have that level of clarity or that sufficient level of understanding, then we can go to the third and final stage, which is the tell stage. And that's our turn to share information and be able to add thoughts and ideas to that common pool of knowledge that's being discussed. But we make sure that we do it in a way that is safe. So we talk about sharing information and testing that information and make sure that there's a dialogue on the information shared to get to that point of common agreement and understanding. And once our information is part of that dialogue, we can either look at bringing that conversation to an end, or we may need to move back to different phases of the model to reestablish trust and rapport or to further clarify their value and beliefs. So the process is pretty linear in terms of how you move through it in the initial pass. But then to complete a conversation, then we may be bouncing back and forth between these stages, until we complete the conversation. And we say then we get to that actual outcome. So those are the basic steps of any important conversation. And hopefully you sit back and go, well, that's not that hard. And I wish it was so self-evident in terms of going through all the books and things. But really, those are the three core steps that need to take place while managing any important conversation. There's one more aspect of the model that I want to share with you in this brief overview, and that's the gateways that reside between each of the phases. So between the align, clarify, clarify, tell, and tell to the end of the conversation. And one thing about gateways is, unlike the three core steps that take place in any crucial conversation, gateways are a little bit more malleable in terms of, depending on the sophistication of the person, the type of conversation, we may tweak the gateways a little bit to make them fit into an individual circumstance. But the three that I'm going to go through with you right now are fairly universally applicable, and it really comes down to our verbal agility to kind of craft the question in a way that really comes across as professional and caring and not as something canned. With that being said, let me go through the three that we consistently use as a starting point, and then we may tweak depending on the student and their specific conversation types. So the first one is between align and clarify, and it's obtain the okay to ask questions. So what we're doing is we're moving from that alignment phase. We're really trying to gain rapport and trust and just get that level of comfort set so we can have a meaningful dialogue. And then to transition from that rapport building dialogue into more of a let's get into the meat of the conversation, we promote and we teach our people to ask for the right to ask questions, because this allows the actor to obtain control of the conversation because they are the ones asking the questions. So their questions can be pointed in a specific direction. But to be respectful, as well as to have a meaningful gateway, we like to ask for the okay to ask questions. And this is probably not a foreign concept to you if you've studied complex sales and investigation and things, but rest assured that it's a pretty simple thing to do, but it's also a very objective thing to watch out for if we're trying to provide feedback for people on how well they're managing the conversation. And we could talk volumes about why we do this and the value of doing this, but rest assured it's objective, and it's certainly a thoughtful and respectful thing to do when managing an important conversation. The next gateway is between the clarify and tell phase, and here we're asking for the okay to share our information. So what the gateway is promoting is having a clear transition from investigating and kind of gathering that level of clarity and understanding and shifting gears and actually asking for the okay, the invitation by the customer for us to add some information or for us to share our insights. And again, it's a very objective and very respectful thing to do. And when done well, it sounds completely natural, and it's very good at managing customers' comfort as well as demonstrating that the actor is doing a good job of managing the overall conversation. And the last gateway is obtaining agreement on the next steps. And so it's around asking questions around, are we in agreement as to what we're going to do next as a result of this conversation? And when you look at important conversations in general, they're going to have a certain level of value to them. They oftentimes have a certain level of cost to them too when you add up the number of salaries and elapsed time that's taken place during the conversation. And what we don't want to do, which often occurs, is leave the important conversation without an agreed level of clarity on what's going to happen next as a result of this conversation. So the gateway here that we are measuring and providing objective feedback on is, did we do it? Did we get to a point of agreement? And that doesn't necessarily mean that we're obtaining agreement on what we're trying to accomplish, with a call. It can mean that just there's a general agreement on what to do next, period. And so whether there was an agreement obtained or not is the gateway that we're looking for and the objective measurement criteria that we're looking for. So those are the three gateways. They oftentimes take a little bit more explanation for people to really get their arms around the what, the why, than the how. But it should give you some idea on how we measure and manage that conversational process. So that's the overall model. And hopefully this starts looking pretty manageable from a, hey, I can do this. This isn't going to be that hard. And it's incredibly powerful. So if we leverage this model, the clarity that comes with it, the strategy that comes behind it, and then when you learn the skills that are part and associated with each of the stages, great things can happen to your CQ, and they can happen quickly. You'll find on the website that we've developed an ACT conversation model ebook for purchase, and it goes into more detail of each of these stages and each of the different attributes of the model itself. So feel free to check that out if you want to get more into the details of the model at this point. We've also developed a CQ Advantage training program, and the program contains 4 basic steps. There's a self-assessment that is free. It's online. Check it out. It will ask you 14 questions about your ability to manage important conversations and some of the results that you've been obtaining. It will provide you a report of findings and some thought and some self-help ideas. There's also an opportunity assessment, which is around helping you clarify what are those conversation types that are really important in your particular job description, as well as trying to get a feel for the economic value of improving those things. So that can give you a little bit more focus on what conversation types you really want to be kind of honing your skills on or developing your CQ around. Then we have our CQ training course, which is a combination of live instruction, skills development homework, video support, and a host of other great things. And it's really where we work with you on developing your specific skills. And we do that for corporations, we do that for individuals. It really depends on the needs, but there's one foundational training that everybody needs to really understand the model and how it applies to their business world and the skills that they need to be working on developing over a period of time. And then we have ongoing coaching, which, like any skill, if you really want to be masterful, having a coach point out that next level or the most critical thing to be working on now is priceless. And so we can act as a coach for you if you don't have a train-the-trainer situation within your organization, but we certainly will be able to provide you that ongoing feedback to keep you evolving and keep challenging you to that ever higher level of CQ. So real quick about the training course itself. It only requires 6 hours of live training, interactive time, and it provides a tested model for the entire conversational event, which we touched on here in that ACT model. It uses scorecards to measure performance, and it has iterative learning, rapid feedback, and minimum effective load training strategies, which really means that we're just trying to give you exactly what you need and no more. We're not trying to throw 50 different concepts at you to try to make you happy with a bunch of knowledge that you kind of have rattling around your head. We're focused on improving your skill sets so you can actually see demonstrable results in the value that you create as well as the value that people place on you. And then independent of where you're at, interestingly enough, the people that have the most affinity for this program, just kind of coming out of the woodwork, are the people who are already the best at what they do. They're already in complex sales and negotiations. They're already leading organizations because they've understood and they've experienced that the higher their CQ, the more productive they are, the more they enjoy themselves, the more influential they are. So the model certainly accommodates the most distinguished communication people all the way down to the people who are students who we love working with. And I continue to make efforts to push this knowledge further and further down into the earlier schooling stages. It's also effective for all important conversation types. So whether you're a board of a director of a publicly traded organization or you're an entrepreneur who is just trying to start out, we all have conversation types that we could be more masterful at. And the better we are and the better the outcomes are, the faster we're going to grow or the more influential we're going to be. And lastly, it generates measurable improvements in CQ. It's not a knowledge-based course. We're here to help you become more effective and more confident in your most important conversations. And so we can do that through the use of scorecards. You can see how your skills and your disciplines can improve over a period of time. A few of the training course benefits include objective improvement in the student's ability to understand and manage their key conversations. So whether this course is something you're taking or whether you're guiding people or suggesting people or ensuring that people take it, we'll see that there is an objective improvement in what they're doing. Also, conversational performance becomes a measurable and manageable strategy for talent development. So we demystify this idea of communication at the conversational or the important conversational level, and we allow people to objectively see what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong, and what they can do better over a period of time. And then we have this behavioral transformation to greater communication expectations, disciplines, and performance. And one of the most exciting things is that, when I train people, I never see people trying to hide and trying to avoid getting better. Most people truly want to improve in this area. They just don't know what to do. And so when we provide them very clear requests and strategies, they lean forward and they want to get better because they can see that it's not only better for them, but it's also better for the people that they're interacting with. And looked at from a little bit of a different angle would be strategic real-life benefits. So entrepreneurs, no question, they will become more proficient at something that they're always needing, and that's improving their ability around customer acquisition and development discussions, partnering discussions, and anything that has to do with growing their business. Employers, as we talked about earlier at the macro level, they're going to see improvements to their customer relationships. They're going to see faster strategic execution. We'll see better internal productivity, talent development, hiring interviews, kind of goes on and on and on in that space, but real, tangible, intelligent areas of improvement for employers. Employees realize the benefit of better collaboration and innovation with the people they're working with. Conflict mitigation, managing up in regards to how proactive are we at engaging with our boss and having conversations with them where we clarify what their needs are, what their constraints are, what their real goals and ambitions are, and how do we align our efforts to best support them. In job interviews, obviously that's a huge one also. Educational institutions, they have the ability to, when they have the luxury of choosing who comes to their organization, we have student interviews. There's nothing more telling than doing a decent interview with a person and seeing what kind of CQ are they bringing to the organization. We know that it's a fairly elusive trait up till now, and so bringing in people that have a higher CQ is going to lead to more successful students. And we also have strategic and measurable communication skills development. And when we look at CQ in this area of conversation and communication training, it's missing from educational curriculums. And so I'm really excited to be working with institutions now on integrating this into their educational process. And then corporate relationships. Obviously, institutions have an important relationship with corporations. I mean, that's where their students go after they're done with school. That's how they get rated in many other programs for their national rankings. And so corporate relationships are a big deal. And if their people are trained on better managing those customers, good things are going to happen in many different directions. And last but certainly not least are the students. By increasing a student's CQ, they're going to do a much better job at job interviews. They'll do a better job of networking with their other fellow students, which we all know as we've gotten further and further away from our school, that our network of relationships that we gain and we obtain during school pays huge dividends later in life. Another one is collaboration with instructors. It's a little bit like managing up. How do we engage with instructors, and how do we have a good quality relationship? And oftentimes, it's a one-dimensional. We forget that we even have an option to engage with instructors, and it's incredible what you can learn from them, and how much more rich the educational experience can be with a better ongoing working relationship with an instructor. And in conclusion, I really hope that this has given you more clarity on what CQ is, why it's so important, how you can develop it through the use of the ACT conversation model, how this translates into real life benefits to people and organizations. And this leads us to kind of a smart question, and that is, what can you do today to start improving your CQ? And like many great things, you don't need to spend money. You can take the self-assessment. You can see what it shows you and how it guides you, and see what that provokes in terms of desire and motivation. And you can also complete the CQ opportunity assessment, which will help you hone in on those really important conversation types for your particular job description. And that again can be done online at the CQ Factor website in that scorecarding section. So complete those and see what kind of comes to life. If you want some help, if you want some training, we're here for you. If you want to go it alone, that's absolutely fine too. And you can use ACT Conversation Model ebook to help give you some more details and give you some self-study suggestions on how to develop your CQ on your own. And if you like training or you enjoy the benefits of the efficiency of working with experts in this area, feel free to contact us. We'd love to work with you as a student. We'd love to coach you over a period of time. It's all good stuff as long as you keep the CQ factor visible and you keep thinking about that and you see how it plays into your world. And it's oftentimes easier to see how it's affecting other people than it is ourselves. In fact, it's much easier to see how other people aren't managing conversations well when you're the customer, and you can feel the effect that it has on your perception of those people who are doing less than an optimal job. And conversely, your impression of people that do a great job of managing important conversations. So it's a skill. It's something that's certainly a choice. It's not a God-given talent. And anybody's current level of CQ can be increased. And the value that's going to come from that, I can assure you, is going to be profound. So again, thanks for your time. I hope you found this very educational and stimulating. And we look forward to hearing from you sometime soon. Thanks.